I've been watching a lot of TV recently, so I wanted to share a wrap up of everything that I have gone through in the past couple of weeks and months and recommend some of my favorite shows to you. So let's get right into it. I'm going to go through this in chronological order based on when these shows premiered. So the first show that I want to talk about is Bridgerton Season 3. Bridgerton Season 3 follows Penelope and Colin. Every single season in the Bridgerton show follows a new couple who are falling in love. This is a very divisive season because Penelope is famously a character that not many people enjoy, and I did have a lot of gripes against her in season 2, but when I entered season 3, so much time had passed between season 2 and season 3 that I felt somewhat forgiving towards her. I understood where she was coming from, and we got to see her family life a lot more in season 3, which made me feel for her because she is in a situation where she is surrounded by her sisters and her mother, and they're very overbearing and very mean to her, and we see her navigating society as she is trying to find a husband to leave this household and start a life for herself because she feels so deeply trapped by those around her. So I really enjoyed Penelope's journey, and I think that was my favorite part of the season, but I did not enjoy the fact that this season was split up into 2 parts. I think Netflix is doing that in order to make you pay for 2 months of Netflix, because one part I believe took place in May and then the second part took place in June, and I do think that's just a really easy way for them to get guaranteed viewers for 2 months. That's just my conspiracy theory about Netflix, but it's also to build up word of mouth. But for a romance show where drama is at an all-time high, I think in order to keep that momentum, having the entire season come out maybe on a weekly basis would have hit harder than splitting up the seasons into 2 parts, because that really took me out of the story, and by the time we got onto part 2, I wasn't necessarily a fan of the journeys that we were going on because we were following so many different side characters like Francesca and Benedict. I do have to say I loved Francesca's side plot the most because she is one of my favorite characters. She's so demure and so quiet, and I just love the journey that she went on because it felt so true to her character and it felt so sweet, and knowing where this story is going to lead really excited me to see her journey begin in this season. And then for Benedict, I was not impressed by his side plot in this season. I felt as though we were regressing his character because for some reason he was telling the woman that he was hooking up with that he's not an artist, and I'm like, you literally are. We saw you being an artist in season 2. Why would you just like lie about that? And then the relationships that he was diving into felt so flat and kind of shoehorned into the storyline just to make the season feel a little bit sexier without making it centered around Colin and Penelope, which I would have rather enjoyed. I feel like we never really got to breathe with Colin and Penelope. We only ever got to see snippets of their romance and their budding relationship as they are transitioning from friends to lovers, but we were bogged down by so many different storylines in Bridgerton season 3 that I felt like I didn't really know their journey and I couldn't truly root for them. And also, I'm just not a fan of Colin. I don't like him as a character, and I think that Penelope deserves so much more than Colin, but that's just a personal opinion. So I was never truly sold on him as a love interest. But overall, Bridgerton season 3 was beautifully filmed. I loved Penelope's journey. I think they really did her justice and made the audience get won over by her again after 2 seasons of disliking Penelope because of the secret that she holds that I don't want to spoil if you have not seen Bridgerton. But I think this season could have been so much stronger if we solely focused on Penelope the way that we focused on Kate and Anthony in season 2. We had a few storylines that were mixed into that overarching story, but for season 3 I felt like they were trying to do so much, so that's the reason why season 3 is not my favorite season of Bridgerton overall. Speaking of another disappointing season from a fantastic show, I saw season 4 of The Boys. The Boys is one of my favorite shows ever. It is such a compelling and fresh take on the superhero storyline, and we get to follow these heroes who aren't good people, who utilize their their powers for evil and create this kind of overlordship over their society. And while we're exploring that, we also follow a group of vigilantes who are set out on destroying the superheroes. So season 4 of The Boys began after such a compelling and explosive finale of season 3. That finale was one of my favorite finales I've ever seen on television. It left me so anxious to see what was going to happen in season 4 because it felt like we were culminating to this really high stakes scenario where characters are going to die. But season 4 felt like such a disappointment. I feel like we really lost the plot for the entire story, especially because it was going in such a strong direction. To have it completely fall off the course that it was set to go on and really devolve some of our favorite characters felt so disappointing. I felt as though Billy's journey was a complete mess. I didn't know where we were leading towards. It did have a really cool plot twist that completely rocked me to my core, but I feel like we are losing the plot on Billy. I don't know if it's true to the comic, and I know that they deviate from the comics a lot, and I've never read it and I don't plan on reading it, but for Billy, he felt like such a strong presence in this entire story, and the way that they navigated his journey in season 4 felt so different from the Billy we knew in seasons 1, 2, and 3. I do understand that he's going down a really dark path, but the path was just so messily executed, and I couldn't really get myself hooked into his journey because it felt so cluttered in a way. I also felt the same for Huey and Starlight. I find them to be the driest characters in the entire show, and I feel like they were put in the back burner of this entire season, and Huey's character especially was just treated like a rag doll in a way that felt somewhat problematic, and I feel like the show writers just kind of use him like this punching bag, and it kind of feels yucky in a way. It felt yucky for the first 3 seasons, and then they really doubled down on it in season 4, and I was like, hey, a lot of those scenes weren't needed, and yet it was shown. And I actually fast forwarded through a couple of scenes of Huey's that were just so grotesque in a way that was just not even entertaining to watch. And I don't know what they're doing with Huey's storyline, but another storyline that was really confusing to me was Kimiko and Frenchie, who I thought had an established relationship, but then we enter the season and it doesn't feel like they're in any form of a relationship anymore. It felt like they broke up off screen, and I didn't understand why they did that completely, and they never really explained why they had fallen apart. And then we had to watch their individual journeys knowing that they should be together and they belong together, but instead they were separated, and I truly think it was just to explore their own storylines, but I think it could have been done together. I have so many critiques about The Boys season 4. I really did not enjoy any episode except the Homelander episode. I believe it was like episode 3 or 4 where we focused solely on Homelander's backstory, because we know Homelander as this invincible man who is gaining so much power to the point where he feels untouchable. But what brought him to that place? What brought him to that mindset? What brought him to that path of his life that is full of destruction and full of hatred? And we spend an entire episode exploring why that is and exploring him going back to his past. And I thought that episode was absolutely fantastic, like Emmy worthy. It was one of the best episodes in The Boys. Somehow, against all odds, the showrunners exposed Homelander's past and made me go, oh, I can understand why he's so angry. I can't justify his actions because he's a terrible person and probably one of the scariest villains that I've ever seen on television, but you can now understand why he comes from the place that he comes from. And I wish the rest of the episodes felt like that, had that strength, had that gruesome energy that made you want to look away, but you can't look away because the stakes are so high that you know that this is only going to lead towards destruction. But I felt like we were just meandering this season. I felt like the showrunners were just scrambling to piece together these storylines and develop these characters further, but it only felt like they were ruining the characters while they were doing that. I also have a question for you, the viewer, if you watched The Boys. I don't understand why they didn't tie together the connection between Gen V and The Boys. They did in a way, but the way that Gen V ends should have directly tied into season 4 of The Boys. Boys, and it felt like those two seasons were written separately and were never discussed in a room together. And I'm so confused about why that is, because I kept wondering while I was watching season 4 of The Boys, when is Gen V going to be tied into this storyline? And it never truly felt like it was, and I don't understand why they didn't try and puzzle piece those two shows together, considering the fact that they are taking place in the same world, taking place at the same time, and they should fit together perfectly to progress the boys' storyline. That's the part that confused me the most. I'm really hoping that they can pull it together and end this show with the justice that it deserves, because this show is so strong. And to have the last few seasons fall apart completely makes me so sad, because it deserves so much more than what it got in season 4. Speaking of another show that disappointed people but did not disappoint me, I saw season 3 of The Bear. Season 3 of The Bear is for the cinema girlies. I feel like you have to enjoy character progression and just character exploration in order to enjoy season 3 of The Bear, because that's exactly what it is. It is a season to allow you to understand where people are coming from. It's a season to explore the other people in the kitchen and kind of put Carmy on the back burner to its detriment, because Carmy is the face of The Bear. Carmy is the bear, and we want to see him progress as a character, considering he has so much happening behind the scenes in his mind, in his past. There's a lot going on with Carmy, and I felt like this season was not the Carmy show. This was the kitchen show. We got to explore every single person in the kitchen, and we got to learn more about their past. We got to learn more about their motivations, what they're working towards, and we also got to see them continue on in their journeys in a way that felt so cinematic. The first episode was absolutely beautiful, and in my notes I wrote that it felt like we were going through Carmy's resume. We were going through every single job that he had in his past and the lessons that he learned in the various kitchens that he worked in, and the chefs that impacted him and made him the chef he is, whether that be positively or negatively. It did feel like we didn't see any character progression from Carmy. We got a lot of character progression from everyone else, but it felt like he was stagnant. He didn't learn any lessons. He didn't improve himself in any way, which we should have seen in order to progress the story forward, because there's a lot that Carmy has to unpack from his past in order to move forward into his future. But in the other episodes of the show, we got to explore the side characters who I'm always wondering about. I'm always wondering where they came from, why they started working at the Bear. One of my favorite episodes was actually Napkins. This was directed by Io, who is Sydney in the Bear, and I think she did such a fantastic job at exploring Tina's character. Tina's one of my favorite characters in the Bear because she's just so mysterious. She's a very quiet figure. She's very calm. She's very collected in this kitchen of pure chaos, and I've always wondered how she got this job in the first place. So we get to follow her journey that leads her up to working in the Bear, and the way that they explore the job market and getting fired and looking for a job and feeling so worthless as a candidate hit so close to home, because I was laid off in January, and let me tell you, the job market is so demeaning. It makes you want to cry. It will make you cry. It makes me cry nearly every single day, and I've never truly seen it captured in a book, a TV show, or a movie until this episode. They explored what it's like to apply to positions and feel very strong in your character and your skill set, and to be brushed aside like you're just nothing. And that entire journey in that singular episode felt like a short film. It was beautiful, it was emotional, it was raw and heartfelt. That was actually Io's directorial debut, and her vision is so clear. It gives me goosebumps. Like, when I think about that episode, it makes me emotional, because I've never related to something on a deeper level than that episode, and it just really hit home. And every single episode in this show really hit home, because you get to understand these characters so much more, and they feel so authentic. The Bear always feels like I'm coming back to something familiar and lovely amidst absolute chaos. And even though we didn't get to see any real progression from Carmi, I do appreciate the journeys that we went on with the individual characters on the side, because I feel like we truly know every single character now, and now in the next season we can push forward with their journeys and their development. So let me know what you think about The Bear. Did you enjoy the journeys that we went on? Did you enjoy the individualistic episodes, or were you hoping for a lot more plot and progression from Carmi? Because I can see both sides and I appreciate both sides, but I was satisfied with this season of The Bear and I just really connected with it. Speaking of another season of a show that I really enjoyed, I loved House of the Dragon season 2. I was so excited about House of the Dragon season 2 and I needed to know what was gonna happen that I listened to the entirety of the Fire and Blood book. Why? Because I needed to spoil myself. I needed to know what was going to happen. And now that I know everything that's going to happen in this show, I'm set. I'm set. Sometimes I really enjoy spoiling myself because I can compare and contrast the show to the book. And while the show is deviating from the book with its characters and with the actions that the characters make, I still somewhat appreciate it. I thought the season was really strong in terms of really establishing the war and the different sides of the war. I felt like it was needed in order to understand the absolute animosity between the Greens and the Blacks. I do have to say, I wish there was more action this season. It felt like the first season we were like, we're heading towards a war. Then we entered the second season and it said, we're heading towards a war. And the war never actually truly happened. There's a lot of setup that needs to be done for House of the Dragon to make sense to a viewer who knows nothing about the book and has not read it or will not read it. So I do understand where they're coming from, but it does feel like they're procrastinating the battles because they don't want to lose these characters and they don't want to spend the budget on these very large battles that need to occur. The thing that annoyed me about House of the Dragon season 2 was the finale, because I was waiting for a moment. I was waiting for a piece of action that was going to leave me absolutely flabbergasted, that was going to leave viewers who knew nothing about the book shocked and just completely on the edge of their seat. But it felt so flat compared to the previous episodes that happened in this season. Some people on Twitter even said it felt like a trailer for season 3, which I completely understand because I was so annoyed. Nothing happened in the finale of season 2 when so much happened in the finale of season 1, and it felt so off kilter. And what makes me nervous about this show is that I believe it's only going to be 4 seasons. I don't think that they can accurately portray the Dance of Dragons in 2 seasons. There's so much that happens in that book. There are so many battles that have to take place. There's so much bloodshed that needs to be had. And in order to compact that into 2 seasons, is going to feel deeply rushed, considering that the first 2 seasons were a slow progression, a slow fire that's burning. So in order to have this entire storyline, this piece of Westerosi history wrapped up in 4 seasons, it doesn't feel like it's feasible in a way that will do the story justice. It feels like a lot is going to be rushed. It feels like there's going to be a lot of disappointment unless they somehow find the ability to extend how long the show is going to be, because I think it needs like 6 seasons in order to do this show justice. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I would love to hear your thoughts about Rhaenyra and Alicent and Daemon. Daemon's storyline was so annoying and repetitive and so aimless, and I wish we had gotten more from him, but I know where we're going with Daemon, and they kind of needed to meander because where he's going... Anyway, House of the Dragon. I enjoyed it. I understand where they're coming from. I do love the tension that they're building. I do think they need more action. I think they need to stop being afraid of losing the amount of characters that they're going to lose in this war, and they really need to get to the nitty-gritty and show us the war instead of telling us we're going towards a war. I want to see the war. That's what I want, House of the Dragon. I feel like I've been talking forever, but I do have 2 more shows that I want to recommend that I don't really have to analyze in such detail compared to the previous shows that I've just mentioned. But I have 1 show on Peacock, 1 show on Netflix, so if you have either one, I would highly recommend you watch The Traitors or The Mole. So The Mole is a revival of a show from like 2001 that came to Netflix, and it follows a group of contestants who are placed in Australia for the first season, and they are working to build as much money in the prize pot in order for the last contestant to win X amount of money. But here's the catch. One player is the mole, and they are set out to sabotage every competition and mission that these players have to take part in order to make the prize pot lose as much money as possible. But they have to do it in a way that isn't obvious, that will make them be exposed as the mole. And what's really compelling about this show is that you don't know who the mole is. So you're watching this entire reality show that feels like Survivor, but you don't know who is sabotaging these missions. I love competitions where people have to do these really daring things in order to win money, but I also love the conniving, secretive aspect of this show. And that's also present in The Traitors. So The Traitors is similar to the mole, and it has a Survivor aspect because they have to do a lot of physical competitions in order to win money, but then they introduce this somewhat Clue type of aspect to the show, which I think is really, really fun. So we follow a group of contestants who stay at a really cool castle for X amount of weeks, and they all are taking part in physical activities in order to win as much money for the prize pot. But here's the twist that differentiates it from the mole. Hidden amongst the faithful are the traitors, whose goal is to eliminate the faithful and claim the prize for themselves. Under the cover of darkness, the traitors murder the faithful one by one in a treacherous spree, while the faithful try to uncover the traitors and banish them from the game. So at the end of every episode, they all meet in a King's Arthur round table, and they get to discuss who they think the traitors are. And then at the end of their discussion, they get to vote on who they want to banish for the night. So majority wins, and whoever gets banished gets to stand up and tell the people whether or not they're a faithful or a traitor. So your mission is to banish as many traitors as possible because you want the faithfuls to win. If the faithful contestants banish all the traitors, they will share the prize fund. But if a single traitor makes it to the end, they get to steal all the money. So this is a game of pure deception, and you know who the traitors are from the beginning of the show. So you get to watch how they work this crowd and how they manipulate people into trusting them to vote for other faithfuls in order for them to keep going further and further in the game in order to win that prize fund. Because if there's a single traitor left by the end of the show, in the finale, they get to win all the money. I immediately got hooked into the show. I prefer the UK Traitors compared to all the other Traitors shows because they have one in America, Australia, and New Zealand, but I prefer the UK one the most. But I also really enjoyed The Mole because it is so fun to watch the show and try and figure out for yourself who is the mole. So both shows are really fun if you're looking for something exciting to hook you in for hours on hand. I would highly recommend both of those shows. But those are all the TV shows that I've been watching recently. I haven't been watching a lot of movies, I haven't been reading a lot, but I have been watching a lot of TV, and I have so many thoughts that I had to share with you all. So I hope you enjoyed this really long chatty video. If you want to follow me anywhere else on social media, all my links will be down below. I post a lot on my Instagram stories. I'm posting a little bit more on TikTok if you want to follow me there. If there are any TV or movie videos that you would like to see from me in the future, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what shows you've currently been watching and loving and what you would recommend to me, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!